Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means. That's Stefan Krajisnik, and that's Andrew Gillis. Get the text, 614-350-3315. Why should you get the text? Because that is exactly all we're basing this pod off of. We asked our texters for questions, and we're going to answer a lot of them. We did not get a lot of questions, but we got a lot of things to talk about on this pod because I just felt like the questions are going to lead to some interesting conversations on where people think this team is now. They've won their 9th ever national championship, and Ryan Day joins Paul Brown, Woody Hayes, Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer, and, well, him. Yeah, those are the 5 head coaches. I don't know why I counted that so weird. Starting from the 614, now that Ryan Day has a ring, I think it's time to ask, what does Ryan Day have to do to get on the Mount Buckmore of OSU coaches? What about to pass Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel? So, as you guys know, the Mount Buckmore thing is essentially us just Mount Rushmore, just using the word Buckeye because it's Buckeye Talk. Stefan, where is Ryan Day for you right now? Now that he's got a ring, he's one of the 5 coaches ever to get a ring. If you had to rank Ohio State's head coaches, the championship head coaches, because that's obviously that's not all that matters, but that's what we're talking about here. Where is Ryan Day on that list right now?
I have him 4th on that list right now, and he's done what he needs to do to get into that conversation, win a national title, right? But the one thing that's always going to stand in his way between Urban and Tressel is obviously going to be the Michigan situation.
Mm-hmm.
And understandably so, right? Those guys had a lot more success against Michigan than Ryan Day has had. However, Ryan Day talked earlier this week about how he wants to win multiple championships at Ohio State. And I think that this run, the way Ohio State played in the playoff, could maybe spark some more success against Michigan. If there is some kind of mental hurdle there, whether it be against Michigan specifically or just in big games in general, I think Ohio State kind of got past that. So I think Ryan Day has the potential to jump an Urban Meyer or a Jim Tressel. I think it'll be easier to jump Urban. I think Tressel, just because of the Ohio connection, kind of I think the situation Tressel walked into was maybe tougher than the other 2 coaches. And I think maybe just the way he's beloved in Ohio could help Tressel out a bit. But I think if Day starts having some more success against Michigan and or wins another national title, which, listen, I'm predicting right now that Ohio State's going to win the title in 2026. I don't know about 2025, but I think they're going to be the best team in 2026. When you look at the roster and the way it's constructed right now, this is a very, very early, bold prediction.
I mean, we're going to do that later this offseason. We're going to do a super, super early out projection where it's essentially we're combining what the roster is right now and also, Andrew, recruiting efforts and all those different things. We always do that 2 years out prediction. So, I mean, if you want to get a head start and say they're going to win a ring in 2 years, even though they just won one 2 weeks ago, have at it.
Hey, listen, teams have done it back to back. It wouldn't be shocking, right? I think the pieces are in place for Day to make a run and, jump guys like Urban and Tressel. I think it's going to be tough. There's a lot of things you got to accomplish, and I think a lot of it probably starts with beating Michigan this upcoming year. But the way his resume is built right now with the national title and the coaching record that he has, if he fixes the rivalry or wins more national titles, he's in line to be, right up there with some of the best in program history.
So it sounds like your order is Woody, Tressel, Meyer, Day, Paul Brown.
Yeah.
Okay. Andrew, what's your order?
Probably that. I think that's probably the fair way to rank them. Because it is funny that, you talk about, Ohio State coaches, and for so long, we talked about John Cooper as like, hey, he's got the 2nd most wins in program history. Nobody cares because he couldn't beat one team. And it felt like there were a lot of people who were using that as the Ryan Day example, right? Like, think about how many texts we saw from our texters that would say, he's just John Cooper. That's who Ryan Day is. All he is John Cooper reincarnated. But basically, he has flipped that now to where he has won a national championship, and now you're looking at it going, okay, well, if he wins one more national championship, the only guy with more national titles at Ohio State ever is Woody Hayes. He would be above Urban Meyer. He would be above Jim Tressel. So I think it is easy to forget in this kind of 4-year run that we're on, I guess really since COVID. Ryan Day has beaten Michigan before. I think you need to do it again. You can't just say this is like a bingo free space L every year.
Yeah,
You definitely
one
need.
in five. 1 in 5 is okay at national titles. 1 out of 5 in Michigan games is
Right.
not the same.
Yeah, like if you get that to 500 even, because Michigan has been good for a couple of these years. Like I think I know the Stallion stuff. I get it. We've talked about that enough. But like Michigan was talented those years. This year's team, even the one that, they didn't have them when they played Ohio State, like they had them in 23, and the 2025 NFL draft might have 4 Michigan players go in the first round. That's like they were very talented. So, if you go 500 in games against really talented teams, all right, teams that are equally as talented as you, okay. If you win another national championship, you are creating a spot in Ohio State lore that just hasn't existed for anyone other than Woody Hayes. Think about the way that we talk about Urban Meyer around this beat and around this team, and the way that we talk about Jim Tressel around this team and around this beat, of just like how legendary they are. And anytime something happens, somebody runs to Jim Tressel to get a comment. Anytime something happens, everybody runs to Urban Meyer to get a comment. No, I know Urban Meyer's in the media now, so like he's more
Yeah.
forward facing. But like it feels
I mean,
like
so is
everybody.
Jim Tressel, he's got a podcast.
Does he really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day have been on it.
Oops. But it's like, you hear these things where everybody like wants to run to these people to get their opinion about Ohio State football, and it's like, okay, there's a very real scenario that in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years, that Ryan Day, quote unquote, has accomplished more than those coaches did at Ohio State, because he might have more national championships. If he beats Michigan a few more times, wins another national championship, like it's Woody Hayes and Ryan Day. That's it. 1-2. And then you can have the conversation at 3, 4, 5. That's where we'd be at.
Let me say one thing as well. I think this kind of particularly pertains to the John Cooper conversation we had throughout the season of, people were kind of, we've had conversations kind of along the beat of, what does a Cooper era look like if the 12-team playoff existed, right? Like how many of those teams would have. But here's the thing. The run that Ohio State just went on almost kind of discredits that to me, where it's like, yeah, sure, they had an extra opportunity to make the playoff, but they had to beat top 5 teams, top 10 teams. They had the toughest path outside of if Tennessee had made the run that they had. They had the toughest path. So we can point today and say he's had the benefit of the playoff era, especially the 12-team playoff era. But if that's what the runs look like, that does not make it any easier to accomplish what they accomplished.
It's like the born on third base thing. Yeah, but you still have to get home, right? Which can sometimes be the most difficult part, is finishing the job. You get right there to the finish line, you can't get over the top. I think you should go look at some of those teams from the 90s, Stefan. I think there's maybe one or two who could have made a run like this. And again, we don't live in the SEC, so we're not going to play the hypothetical game here. Gotta take my shots. Woody's number one. He's got 5 national titles, and he's got a building named after him with a statue out in front of it. He's number one. There's not the Ryan Day building, athletic facility, or the Urban Meyer athletic facility, or the Jim Tressel athletic facility. John Brown is number 5, I think, for all of us. Excuse me, Paul Brown. I don't know why I'm thinking about John Brown. That's a whole different human being. Paul Brown, 18-8-1 as Ohio State's head coach from 1940 to 1943. 1-1-1 against Michigan. So his just tenure wasn't long enough to have him in this discussion. He just happened to win a national championship along the way. I do agree that Day is 4th because of that. Here's where I don't agree with you guys. I'm putting Urban above Jim Tressel. James Patrick Tressel. 105-22, and he went 9-1 in the rivalry with a national title. It's just funny how the next coach always solves the problem the previous coach had. Jim Tressel solved John Cooper's Michigan problem, but he also created the SEC problem in a way, right? Because a lot of this, the SEC has had quality teams over the year, but the idea of what the SEC was for the last 15 years started the moment Florida beat Ohio State 41-14. I will argue that until the day I die. That is where it starts. The SEC speed. Oh, the SEC talent. Look how crazy. And who was there? Urban Meyer recruiting all that speed and that talent. Then again, Ohio State did the same thing. Urban Meyer solved that issue. Urban Meyer went 83-9 and 9-0 in the rivalry. Now, again, Michigan had some down years in there, but 9-0 in the rivalry, 7-0 in the rivalry, you can't dismiss that. 7-0 in the rivalry. You want to know why? Because there's no other coach who has gone undefeated in the rivalry with multiple cracks at it. So you can't just dismiss that. He also solved the SEC issue when he beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Now, granted, he also created another issue of the inability to beat teams you had no business being in a game with. But again, every coach has his issue. Ryan Day has solved this issue. Ironically enough, the only unranked team he's ever lost to was Michigan. So he essentially solved that issue. It just happens to be that Michigan was two problems in one. Hey, Ryan Day doesn't lose these games, but also he doesn't beat Michigan unless it's 2019. So that's his burden to carry. He's got to fix that problem. He's not John Cooper anymore, Andrew, because he won a natty. John Cooper didn't. And maybe if we had a 12-team college football playoff in the 90s, he would have. But unfortunately, that's not his era. I mean, people run to him and ask him questions, too. He just says no. Isn't that right, Stefan? When you go ask him, like, hey, you want to talk about what it's like to be Ryan Day? He's like, no.
Yeah,
I do not want to do that.
The questions he gets asked usually pertain to Michigan. So I understand.
Yeah,
why
no, I get it. So he's won, and I think he's got to break even in the Michigan thing. Because it's going to look weird being like, yeah, he's got 2 national titles. Yeah, but he's like 1-5 or 1-6.
Yeah, like
I'm
thinking about that.
We
if
still
he
have
coaches for Ohio State for 12 Ohio State Michigan games. He's
if
3
he's 2
and
10 in those
3
games,
and 9, yeah, and he's got
you
2 or 3 national titles. It's weird.
Ironically enough, John Cooper was 2-10-1. That's I just pulled that out of nowhere and just happened to look at the records. He's got to break even there. Because then what it does is it tells the story of an era of all of a sudden the rivalry is competitive again. It's a back and forth, the way it really hasn't been since Woody Hayes, Bo Schembechler. Woody Hayes went 16-11-1. Are people running around here yelling about the fact that Woody Hayes lost a Michigan game 11 times? That's not the way conversations start with Woody Hayes. You almost forget he has more losses against Michigan. If you take out John Cooper, he has more losses to Michigan than Earl Bruce, Jim Tressel, Luke Fickell, Urban Meyer, and Ryan Day combined. And nobody cares. Because he's Woody Hayes. He's got 5 natties to his name. So I think if Ryan Day, let's just say he coaches here. He's in year 7 already. That's crazy. Let's just say he's here for another 5 years, which I don't think is crazy at this point. And he's bringing up Woody Hayes' name, talking about he wants to win more national titles. So fine. Let's just say he's here for another 7 years. So he coaches at Ohio State for 14 years. If he can get this rivalry by the time he's done to 7-7, or maybe even, better than that. What if he just goes on a run and wins the next 10? Who knows? Or maybe he goes 9-5 or something. But whatever. If he has a 500 record or better against Michigan, and he wins 2 or 3 national titles, I think he's the second greatest coach in Ohio State history, especially to your point, Stefan, now that we're looking at what this run has to look like. And that's not saying every year they're going to play the other 4 teams who are in the top 5 of the AP poll, but you're going to play at least 2 of them to get to your championship. I think that's pretty spot on. I think he can get the 2. If he gets 3 rings and an above 500 record against Michigan, I think we have to talk about him and Woody Hayes.
If he gets 2 and he goes like 5-9 in his career against Michigan, do you still have him at number 2?
I hate you.
But keep in mind though, if he goes 5-9 against Michigan, then down the stretch here he would have gone what, like 3-5 against them. So like it would, he wouldn't go down as, oh, he lost 4 straight. He'd go down as, we remember him as losing 3 out of the last 5 or whatever however we want to frame it.
And it also becomes it doesn't sound like these Michigan wins are going to exist long term. It does. The way this is headed, it seems like eventually Michigan's last 3 seasons are going to cease to exist in the minds of many, even though if you watched it, you know it existed. They're going to be in a basement somewhere with the Fab Five stuff. So that maybe changes it for people who maybe you're getting introduced to football at 5, 6, 7 years old. You're just not going to know about this era of Ryan Day's time.
You know what else we need to consider? There could be a year, it could happen this upcoming year, where he loses to Michigan in November and beats them in December or January.
Yeah, that's his Michigan record.
Changes it a lot. If you're 1-5 against, or you're 2-5 against Michigan, but that number 2 came in the college football playoff semifinals, that accounts for like 3 of them.
Yeah, I agree. His era just allows him a little bit more leeway with this, which is fine. Okay. I might send that out to our texters and see what they feel about that. From the 605, I've had some time to reflect on the previous season. What a freaking roller coaster. Who you telling? I was very disappointed following the Michigan loss. I called Day a bum. I was a huge supporter, and it all crumbled after losing to a 6-5 team, especially the way they did. I wasn't in a fire him crowd, but I almost was. So was I. That being said, I screamed more loudly than anyone following that Jack Sawyer scoop and score, even more following the JJ 3rd and 11 catch. Actually, I was more loudly during the scoop and score. Yes, being a Buckeye fan is fun, but it also has very low valleys. My question, is there a program in the country whose team and supporters have such high expectations and mountaintop, but also feels such extreme disappointment and extreme valleys in the losses, especially against the team up north? Sports, man. This team is a roller coaster, but strap me in, baby. Let's go, Bucks. So, Stefan, you've covered an SEC team before. It wasn't a good SEC team, but you've covered an SEC team before. Andrew, you've covered other teams in general. Are we living in the Ohio State sports bubble when we talk about how crazy this fan base is? You know, the lunatic fringe, those guys. Are we living in the sports bubble of the team we cover, and so maybe it seems louder than it actually is? Or, given the alumni base of this program, given how universal Ohio State football fans are, you can literally find them everywhere. Like, there's an alumni base in Texas that I think is the largest one in the country. Is there something to all fan bases are crazy? That's almost what comes with the territory. If you're not a crazy fan base, then what are you doing? But this fan base might be a little bit louder, similarly to what we see with Knicks fans, Laker fans, Cowboy fans, Yankee fans.
Yeah, there's probably an element to that. I think Ohio State fans have been in this weird spot where there are probably like 5 schools, maybe 6 in the country where the expectation is to win every single game. You know, Ryan Day kind of jokes, but I don't think he's really joking when he mentions how hard it is sometimes when the expectations are to win every single game. But like Bama doesn't get lumped into this conversation because their expectation is to win every single game, but like they did like for a long time. Like they have been treated to the greatest era of college football coaching ever. Right? Ohio State fans haven't had that. They had, the last 10 years, Ohio State's been good. They've had expectations to win every game, but they weren't rewarded with a national title at the end of it. On top of which, there's a rivalry that, the Iron Bowl is probably the closest thing to it. But even then, the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry is a notch above in terms of, the fire surrounding it, right? The importance of winning that game. So Ohio State is just in this weird spot where its fans have the expectations of a Bama and a Georgia. They just haven't been given the rewards that Bama and Georgia fans have gotten in the last, Georgia more recently and Bama, obviously the stretch with Saban. So I think Ohio State is in this bubble on its own where they have the expectations of these marquee programs, but in the last decade, they haven't been given the success, the trophies that now obviously that has come to an end with this college football playoff run. I think LSU would maybe be the closest comp where their expectations their fans have the expectations to win every single game, and they win a national title like every 5-10 years. But the difference there is that LSU between those 5 to 10 years is sometimes just awful, and Ohio State continuously is good, but has struggled to reach that mountaintop. So Ohio State is in this weird spot because no program has had the sustained success over the last 15 to 20 years that Ohio State has had. Yet you look at Bama, they have more national titles. You look at LSU, they've collected national titles. You look at Georgia, they've collected national titles. So there's this weird dynamic of Ohio State has those expectations, but for whatever reason, it takes them a decade between championships when in reality, they could be up there with Bama to compete with back-to-back national titles, to compete with Georgia, going on a run, trying to get a three-peat. Like that's all out there for Ohio State. Yet for whatever reason, they haven't been able to reach it as consistently as a Nick Saban run, a Kirby Smart run there when he went back-to-back.
Ohio State, I think, is at the top for the highest of highs and the lowest of lows because there's not another program in the country that hypes up this game in the regular season against Michigan as the be all end all. Like, how many times have we done that flipping poll where we ask people, would you rather win a national championship or beat Michigan? And then, very funny, it happened in the first year of the 12-team playoff. But no team has that. Like, Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach of all time, was on ESPN talking about how it's okay if you lose to your rival. And think about the backlash that he got from Ohio State fans that were like, what are you talking about? That's insane. No, it's not. And then because he was like, yes, it is. I won a national championship that season. You can still win a natty. And then, well, Nick might have been onto something. But the level of vitriol and anger that people have for losing that game and then winning it on the other side and the level of excitement they have, it's just nobody else has that for a regular season game. So it's not just the fact that the highs are high and the lows are low, it's that they can go up and down really quickly. You can be 11-0 and there are a lot of people in this fan base, and I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong. They've grown up rooting for this team. They've loved this team their whole life. And they say, yeah, but it doesn't matter worth a damn as long as we don't beat the Michigan guys. As long as we don't beat that team. As long as we don't beat them. Like, there are a lot of people that have that opinion. So nobody else has that. Find me another team. You can't. Duke basketball, North Carolina basketball, they play twice a year. Like, their rivalry's intense. It's not this. The Iron Bowl's intense. It's not this. Like, Army Navy don't have, they have the history and they have the pageantry. They have the pageantry and all those kind of things you want to throw on rivalries. They have all that. And their season does kind of come down to one game. But they are also not competing at as high of a level as Ohio State is, right? So it's like, Army Navy, like, hey, you win that game and your season's made, but Ohio State still has other stuff to do after that game. And Army Navy don't, because, best case scenario for them, it's okay, well, we're 9-3, 10-2, and we're going to play a big program in a bowl game. So there's just not a program like them. In college, there's not a team like them that has these expectations. Like, I mean, I guess maybe the Kansas City Chiefs are getting there, where it's like the fans are just like, you know what? Every year we're in the AFC Championship game, and that's the way it should be. Maybe Alabama was close under Saban, where, like, I think the stat was like, if you were recruited under Saban and you stayed for a 4-year cycle, you won a national championship under him, at least one. So the expectations have been close at other places, but to me, the Michigan game, that just changes the dynamic, because the lows can be so low. And when you are expected to win every game because you're better than like 98% of the teams in college football, that's a really, really high bar to clear. So when you don't do it, the fall's really hard, but the peaks are really high. So yeah, for me, it all surrounds that game in late November.
The standard's the standard, man. That's my answer. And it's the most annoying thing that fans, media, and players all say when it comes to Ohio State, but it's true. That's the standard's the standard, and it's to beat Michigan, win Big Ten titles, and win national titles. First and foremost, Andrew, to your Army point, I'm not going to allow you to dismiss the fact that Army was at least flirting with the college football playoff this year.
Yeah, I mean,
No, don't do that. Don't
it
do
happens every year. Like wouldn't it be fun? And it would be really fun. And then they get on the field with. I know they played the national
12-2.
runners up in Notre Dame, but
Yeah.
they both Army and Navy were undefeated going into that game, and everybody was like, "Hey, maybe." And then they lost by 6 touchdowns. So it's like, all right,
Yeah, but let them have their fun. Ohio State has not lost 3 games during the regular season in a we had to fire our coach because of a tattoo gate and suspend half our players who said, I'm not dealing with the suspension. I'm going to the NFL. Do you realize they have not lost 3 games in a regular season that was normal since 2004? The standard is the standard. That's why this fan base is like that. That's why 605, you felt like this year was a roller coaster. It literally was. I mean, 2 months ago, it's like, hey, man, is Ryan Day coaching for his job? I don't know, man. Ross B. York had to come out and say, no, I'm not firing Ryan Day. Before the college football the season wasn't even over.
And even then, people were like, "Well, is Ross Bjork going to change his mind if they lose to Tennessee?"
Yeah, we were like lying. Yeah, it was
Yeah, we're even lying. It was
immediately as
just
soon as
like-
he said it, we were like, no way. Like,
it's not even lying. It's just you're saying what you have to say right now, dude.
well, and
Because
also,
someone
how many
put a
times
recorder
have
in
you
your face.
seen? How many times have you seen in the pro sports sphere, the college sports sphere, where you have somebody come out like an owner or a
Oh,
president?
yeah, they get
or
fired
whoever,
12
like,
months later.
We
Yeah.
believe in our coach and
Yeah.
we're standing by him, and it's like, all right, well, that's just a prerequisite for getting fired.
Yeah, Florida put out a whole statement this year about not firing Billy Napier, and then we all went, "Oh, okay, so he'll be fired after 2025." Cool.
Yeah.
And now Ryan Day, we just answered a question about where is he at on the Ohio State Mount Buckboard. That's the Ohio State spectrum for you. It's big wins are questioned, close wins are nitpicked, losses are the world is ending. Because the standard is to win national championships. It's to be holding up trophies. It's to produce Heisman Trophy quarterbacks. It is to produce first-round draft picks. It is to send numerous players to the NFL, whether it be Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Marshawn Lattimore, Chase Young, C.J. Stroud, Garrett Wilson, who all were NFL Rookie of the Years. That run is silly. I mean, I've heard Ohio State football players get asked the question of, do y'all see what y'all's players are doing in the NFL? What is going on? Why aren't you winning more? Because the standard's a standard. So I hope you enjoyed your roller coaster. Now you can take a reprieve. You can get a little snack, go to the bathroom if you need to. And in 9 months, it's time to strap back in because it's another roller coaster coming at you. And it's a whole new band of people who are going to send you on that roller coaster because that is the ride you either signed up for or were born into as an Ohio State football fan. From the 513, can you settle a debate I have been having with a friend on Facebook about where Ohio State ranks in NIL? He is basically using it to shrug off the championship that they should have won since they spent so much money. I contend that they are not grossly outspending the top of the contenders, while he is claiming that Oregon is spending half of what Ohio State does, which does not sound right. Thanks in advance. Stefan, I know somebody put out a report where it showed the most expensive rosters this year. Do you have that by any means? Because we can nip this in the bud real
but I'm
quick.
pretty sure Texas and Oregon, I think, may have been ahead of Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Ross Bjork was the only athletic director in the country who was fine saying how much they spent on the roster.
Yeah.
Even then, we don't have proof that what he said was true. I mean, I believe him, but there's a chance that he said 20 mil and maybe it was like 30. I don't know. Ohio State is not the only team spending around $20 million in NIL. I guarantee you the Texases, the Oregons, the Georgias, the Bamas of the world, they're all spending a similar amount. Like, if you don't think Oregon's spending a lot on NIL, then you're just not following college football and the history of Oregon football. maybe Ohio State spent more. Like maybe Oregon spent 18 and not 20. I don't know. Like that. None of this is public record, so it's kind of hard to prove or disprove. I guarantee you, Ohio State's not the only team around that 20 million figure. And frankly, I think Ross Bjork, when he said it, I took it as more of like, hey, here's what we're doing right now. We're ready for when revenue sharing happens. And, athletes, I think Ohio State said they're devoting about 20.5 mil to revenue sharing when that comes about this next year. So I almost took it as like Ross Bjork saying Ohio State's ready for this new era of college football that's going to begin here in a couple months, or college athletics, I should say, that's going to begin here in a couple months. I never, like, when he said 20 mil, I kind of shrugged my shoulder and I was like, I mean, yeah, like what a surprise. Like Carson Beck just got 3 mil to go to Miami. Like I'm surprised the roster is 20 million. A roster has a lot of players on it. There's a lot of money to be spent. If your quarterback is getting 3 mil, you're gonna tell me Miami's not spending close to 20 million on NIL. Like Ross Bjork just said it. We don't have to pretend like what he said was outrageous just because he's the one who said it out loud.
I think 20 million, Andrew, just might be the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And here's how, to be honest, before it became like a thing for national writers to go, oh, look how Ohio State bought a national. I took it as this. Hey, recruits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. We got it. The list has been going out there, and this is not confirmed by any reporting or anything. It's just a list that somebody had put out there because this is where I'm sure the question has been based off of in the argument. Oregon was number 1 at 23 million. Texas was number 2 at 22.2 million. Ohio State at 20.2 million. LSU 20.1 million, and then Georgia at 18.3 million. And again, this is a list that has been floating around social media, so I don't even know how much stock we want to put into a list like that. Because you're right, Stefan, none of this stuff is public record because you're dealing with collectives, so you can't. And most collectives are nonprofit organizations, so it's not like you can put in a public records request to go get those actual figures, which is what makes the revenue sharing part interesting because Ohio State is a public university, so you can now go, hey, I want the records for this. I want to see the financial breakdown. No different than how you can put in for a coach's contracts because public universities are paying their employees with taxpayer money, so taxpayers deserve to know that. Go ahead, Andrew.
It's allowed.
You're up there.
It's like people
Legal
you should
now?
be spending money. It's legal. Like listen. I'm just gonna say it. There's programs in the past who have paid a few mil to pay for rosters when it wasn't legal. So if you're spending 20 mil when it is legal, what's it matter?
You've heard stories of the bagmen, and it didn't work out so well. They didn't win. There's more to it than that. Here's the point for Ohio State. Here is how they're going to approach it going forward. They are never going to overpay for a incoming recruit unless there's, I don't know, a Jeremiah Smith. That's the exception to the rule. They are going to constantly use their NIL money and their funds to retain as much of their roster as possible. It's how you hold on to Carnell Tate. It's how you hold on to Jermaine Matthews, an underrated guy who I know for a fact teams have been trying to poach him for 2 years now. It's how you get Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Tyleek Williams, Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke, Lathan Ransom to all come back here. That's how you do it. Now, yeah, are there some transfers involved? Sure, there are. Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, Will Howard, Seth McLaughlin, Will Merrick. Those were their transfers. It's not like they had 45 transfers, guys. But what you do is you take the guy who maybe his draft grade is anywhere from the 3rd to the 5th round, and it's like, okay, well, we can get you that here. The money that you would have made as a 3rd to 5th round draft pick, we can get you that here. So come back for another year, make essentially what you would have been making your first year in the NFL, and raise your draft stock and go compete for a national title. That's how all those guys came back. Yeah, the culture motivation of we haven't done anything yet, that matters too, but there's business involved here now, and that's part of the business is getting those guys and retaining those guys. So that's why it was always blown out of proportion. This wasn't Ohio State, whether the number is 20 million, 10 million, 100 million. It wasn't spent on going and buying a bunch of transfers. It was pulling in transfers at places that, quite frankly, even if NIL didn't exist, they probably needed to go get transfers at. Center, running back, safety, quarterback, another tight end. They needed those positions regardless. Just because they got the best safety in the country doesn't mean they still didn't need a safety. They just happened to go get the best safety in the country. But more importantly, it's about retaining your roster. So, underrated guy. Go look at some of the guys who could be gone. We just did a whole pod of third-year guys who might break out. A lot of those guys could have left over the last couple of years. I'm telling you, people have been trying to poach Ohio State's roster, just like I'm sure Ohio State's trying to poach from other people. This is what college football is. And Ohio State's ability to retain those guys, that should tell you everything you need to know about Ohio State's NIL situation. Last question before we take a break. From the 215, I would love to hear what the vibe was at the stadium when Ohio State won the national championship. I'm sure there was a ton of excitement and joy, but was it somewhat underwhelming? I know you all weren't on Buckeye Talk when Ohio State won in 2014, but the feeling that year gave us maybe unmatched. Going from a team that had to sneak into the playoff as a 4 seed only because of a blowout to Wisconsin, needing an upset over Alabama, and then going to beat a powerful Oregon team in the national championship game, all with a third-string quarterback, it felt unexpected and therefore extra exciting. This team, though, felt like they did what they were always supposed to do. After the blowout of Tennessee and Oregon, it almost felt like Ohio State's trophy to lose, and no one could stop them. Don't get me wrong, this is my favorite Ohio State team of all time, and it was definitely the greatest run of all time. I'm nothing but happy and excited for my Buckeyes, but after hearing one of my friends mention that after winning the championship game against Notre Dame, felt a tad bit underwhelming, I can't help but maybe agree because we already knew we would. Stefan, I'll start with you because we were kind of on the field, but we were down there. What did you think of the vibe and the celebration after the game?
I thought I didn't think it was underwhelming, to be honest. I thought a lot of the players and coaches were very emotional. Fans did not leave their seats at all. People were jumping and hugging and high fiving even well after the game had been over. People stuck around. I think a lot of fans were stuck around and were chanting when like SVP was going on to do Sports Center that night. Like that, I didn't think it was underwhelming at all. Here's what I will say. I thought the Cotton Bowl environment post game was even crazier, but that's because I think of the way they won that game. I think in Notre Dame, I know it got tight at the end, but for a while you were pretty confident. I think maybe the celebrations had even started a bit earlier. The Cotton Bowl was kind of a bit more dramatic just because of the Jack scoop and score and everything that came with it. But I didn't think this was underwhelming because I agree. This was what this team was always supposed to accomplish, right? Like they were the betting favorite when the year started to win a national championship. It was them or Georgia. I can't remember exactly. But at the start of the year, Ohio State was one of the two favorites to win it all. But this team didn't go through the playoff with okay, let's go finish the job mentality. They went with an FU mentality of everyone doubted us when this playoff started. Now, it's funny when you get to January 20th and you're like, this team was never doubted. They had the best roster in college football. Well, they were. Like we were all doubting them. There was people who were picking Tennessee to win that first game. So I think there was still some of that emotion and that excitement, even though this was a team that was supposed to accomplish that. Because when they did get it done, they proved a lot of people wrong. And I think that kind of stuck with a lot of the fans and especially the players and the coaches. So I didn't think it was underwhelming. Obviously, I wasn't there for the 2014 or 2002 celebrations. Maybe those had some more excitement around them. But the way this team went through the postseason to get the job finished there at the end against Notre Dame, I thought there was a lot of emotion because this senior class specifically and Ryan Day and this coaching staff have overcome a lot. And a lot of it is adversity they put on themselves, right? I mean, you're the ones who lost to Michigan. You're the ones who lost to a 6-5 Michigan team. Like that's adversity you put on yourself. But that was still a burden that they had to overcome. And I think that still made the championship celebration post game after Notre Dame very meaningful.
What'd you think of the vibes, Andrew?
I don't know. I don't think they were underwhelming at all. I was looking through my text as you were talking about this because I sent a couple of texts when Ohio State was up 21-0 on Oregon. And all I said to one of my friends, OSU is going to win the Natty. And then the next text was, OSU is going to blow everyone out en route to winning a Natty. And that was when it was like 21-0 against Oregon. And I think, I think that it just had this sense of inevitability. Like, whereas with the 2014 team, you lose to Virginia Tech at the beginning of the year, and it's like, ugh. Like, this was supposed to be the year. We were looking at all, like, we have a lot of talent. Like, we were supposed to be really good. And it just, everybody kind of put Ohio State on the back burner all year. And then they come out and they have to beat Wisconsin like they did to make the college football playoff, and then they do. And then you have big, mighty Alabama waiting there for you in the Sugar Bowl, and you're like, all right, well, this is probably not going to happen. We're on our 9th string quarterback. And then you beat Alabama in the manner that you do. And then you get to Oregon, and it's like, oh my God, we're 1 win away from the national championship. And it just feels like it kind of happened quickly. Whereas, like, with this team, it was like, okay, well, they're not going to win anything because they lost to Michigan. And then they come out and they dominate Tennessee, and it was like, okay, well, now we'll see if they can do it. Oh, wait, it's 21-0 on Oregon. Oh, this team woke up. Like, I think it happened pretty quick, and I think there was just like a 3-week sense of, as long as they don't screw this up, they're going to win it. As long as they don't screw it up, the vibes from the building, I mean, they were pretty much exactly as I anticipated them to be. Like, everybody was like hugging everybody. Everybody's like looking for their mom in the stands. Like, it wasn't like it felt like a national championship celebration should feel. Ryan Day's launching his headset into the crowd. Like, all of the unique kind of sporadic moments. Somebody crashes a golf cart. Like, it feels like there were just like these like funny, unique things that happen when a team wins a championship. The locker room smells like cigar smoke. Players are crying in the locker room. Like, the vibes there were like unmatched. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was cool to see. It was cool to be a part of. Yeah. I thought it was awesome.
It just wasn't what I was expecting it to be. And I think that's what this question is about. I think everybody was expecting the national championship version of what had happened in South Bend a year ago, where Ryan Day has finally done the thing people were starting to doubt his ability to do, and he tells everybody off. And he'd have been justified in doing so. If he'd have came out and went, you didn't believe me, where's Lou Holtz? Where's Jim Harbaugh? If he'd have come out on that type of energy, I don't think he would have been wrong for coming out with that type of energy. In fact, I think people in the media and the fan base would have been like, yeah, you're right. Have your moment, Ryan Day. And he didn't do that. Instead, he kind of, I'm going to celebrate with my family. I'm going to celebrate with my players. When he's talking in the post-game press conference, it was a lot more introspective of essentially saying, we've been so close for so many years, and now we're finally over the mountaintop. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe he saved it for behind closed doors. And well, since then, Ohio State's been putting out a bunch of stuff on social media. It was just a wholesome celebration. And it doesn't mean it was a letdown. It just means, I think if we were all expecting him to match the energy we've been giving him for the past 60 days, especially since the Michigan loss, he chose to take the high road and make it about the positive things that came out of all this than giving anybody who had anything negative to say about him over the past 30 days and really the past 6 years any level of energy, which is what he didn't do in South Bend in 2023. He did address the Lou Holtz thing and go, though, this is a tough team route. I'll show you. The dude we were expecting to go, now what are you going to say? Talk that you know what now. Didn't do any of that. And even when you see like the behind the scenes clips of like random media members getting him celebrating with some players, you're seeing Lathan Ransom go, what are they going to say now, coach? What are they going to say now? And Denzel Burke's like, they can't say, you know what? And Ryan Day's just smiling and happy that they won a national title. And so I liked it. I respected it a lot. It just maybe wasn't what I was expecting it to be. That was a lot. That was a long first segment. We got a few more questions I want to get through, though. So let's take a break here and we'll come back with more questions here on Buckeye Talk. We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. We're taking questions from texters. Moving through some of these. Let's have a very quick, I mean like 15 minutes max conversation about Jim Knowles because we've kind of beat it over the head already. Here's the questions we got. Mark Harper from Chicago, one of our loyal guys. He's always sending in questions, always commenting. We love you, Mark. What are your takes on why Jim Knowles left? And then from the 772, do you think Ohio State will benefit from having a new look on our defense from a new defensive coordinator? Earlier in the year, there was some drama between coaches and maybe resulted in some bad calls. It's been well stated at this point that maybe Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson weren't always on the same page and maybe something clicked after the Oregon game. Here's the way I want to address this, Stefan. You are an Ohio State fan. Your defensive coordinator just helped coordinate a defense who over the last 3 years went from abysmal to one of the best defenses in the country, both statistically and from a talent standpoint. And he left. And he decided to go to a historical divisional rival that you now have to play on November 1st. How should you feel as a fan about Jim Knowles, not him just leaving, but where he's going?
Well, I think however you feel is justified. I don't want to tell someone they have to feel a certain way, but I think if you're ticked off and you feel like you got screwed over by, this situation, you feel like Ohio State got screwed over, you're very fair to think that way. I also think if you're a fan who looks at this and says, Jim Knowles, the video that Penn State posted where, he talks about being a Philly guy and how much Penn State means to him and he just wanted to go to Penn State and he felt like that was going home for him, then, I don't blame you if you just kind of sit there and you say, all right, he did what he was supposed to do at Ohio State. Now he wants to go, do kind of this next step in his career, the goal that he's always had, which, by the way, I didn't realize that people in Philly cared like that much about Penn State. Obviously they're, the big football program, but like, I thought Philly was just like Eagles and then just like, I don't care. Apparently,
Landis about that. Apparently, it's like Notre Dame and Penn State are split, and it's like the Eagles are number. Yeah, it's a weird vibe in Philly. Very interesting.
Yeah. Philly, a hotbed for Notre Dame grads, just as all their fans are. Yeah. Listen. It's obviously something that he cared a ton about. I'm sure that factored into it a lot. I understand why fans would be sour about it. I kind of have just looked at it as like college football is a business. And maybe being a reporter as opposed to, a fan all the time, we're kind of just in it where we're kind of numb to this kind of stuff. We write articles in anticipation of things happening that don't actually end up happening just because we're so ready for the business side of things to pan out. I get it. Like if you're a fan, I understand any which way you might feel about this. I understand. The second part of the question about the defense moving forward, you want me to touch on that, or you want Andrew to
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's like, I think we've hit on it in the past where if there is a time for Ohio State to have to make a defensive coordinator move, this kind of does make sense just because you're kind of revamping the roster. Only 3 of your starters are coming back, 3.5, I guess, however you consider Jermaine Matthews. You're revamping the roster a bit, so a different scheme, a different coach coming in at this time, I don't think it's the worst thing, right? Like that, Jack Sawyer, JT, all those guys are extremely talented. They also, I think, benefited from 3 years in a system that they really got, comfortable in and knew like the back of their hand. And I think with a young core coming in, if you're going to have to change the system up, this is not a bad time to do it. I think Jim Knowles is the best defense coordinator in the country, so even if you kept his scheme, but you brought in, younger players, I would still probably prefer that. But like this is, a silver lining situation where if you have to make a change at some point, this is probably when you do it. So there's pros and cons to all of it. I understand people that are ticked off. I understand people that are kind of, whatever about it. I understand all that. So I don't think there's any wrong way to feel about the situation, but I do think Ohio State's in a decent spot to be able to move on from it.
For as much as we talk about you are turning over new guys, you're going to be putting like Caden McDonald in, and you're going to be putting, Caden Curry in and Jermaine Matthews in. And these guys have played in Knowles' system, right? Like these guys have grown accustomed to Jim Knowles. These guys have grown accustomed to what Jim Knowles wants to do. These guys have kind of learned how he wants things done, how he likes things. Like, so yeah, you haven't played in it like in a starting role or in a significant playing role, but you've also been in that system. You've also like learned it through practice and you've learned it in meetings for a couple of years. So I don't know if you want to say benefit, but I do think that in terms of, getting a change, I think that, now might be the chance to not pivot, but maybe give yourself a new look and maybe give yourself some, some variations that, might be able to benefit the 2025 team. So we'll see. But I mean, losing Knowles does hurt. I think he's a really, really, really good defensive mind. So, I think when you look at Ohio State's defense in 2025, right now there's a lot of talent on it, and it's all right. How do you make that work? And the defensive coordinator has, a very important job in that regard.
I think so. The two schools that had become a conversational point outside of Penn State were Oklahoma and Notre Dame. And I think if he had ended up at either one of those schools, fans would not be as angry at Jim Knowles for leaving. But to make a lateral move to a team who is an historical division rival that makes you public enemy number one. So that's how I think fans feel about it. It's not about that you left. It's about where you decided to go. You went to go coach for a guy, and he's from Philly. I understand that. But you went to go coach for a guy who has shown you for a decade that he can't win these games. And now you have to play Ohio State next year. So he's going to get booed a lot on November 1st. He's going to be up in the box probably, so I don't know if he's going to hear any of it, but he's going to get booed a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure if fans are going to be able to get access.
They're just going to be looking up at us like, boo! Like, we didn't do anything. No, not you. Him. Boo! It's fine. From the 614, what do you think is happening with Jelani Thurman? Was he overrated? Is he a development problem? Is he just taking longer for things to click? And then from the 701, what are your thoughts on Jelani Thurman? I feel like he was brought in to develop as the passing weapon for the offense, but hasn't developed into that weapon they wanted, hence going out and getting Max Clare. As someone excited when he came in, I feel Ryan Day has given up on Thurman's development, and rightfully so. I'm not going to go that far. I don't think he's given up on Jelani Thurman's development. Jelani would not be here if they had given up on his development. And he also wouldn't be here if he felt like Ryan had given up his development. What do we do? And we kind of had a short conversation about this yesterday, Stefan, so maybe we don't have to go super long here, but just like, what do you think is happening with Jelani Thurman? And just that idea of whether it's Jelani Thurman, whether it was CJ Hicks last year, the guy who comes in and there's something intriguing about him. The coaches kind of talk about him like there's something intriguing about him. But for whatever reason, they're a hot topic in the offseason, and then the season gets here, and none of those topics actually plays out the way you maybe thought it would in your head. And that's probably happened at other places you've covered too, even if it's not to this level. What do we do with that moving forward? How should we approach Jelani, who was the latest version of this offseason, and how we talk about him and what expectations are for him in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the back end of what you said. I think for Jelani, I think you're going to see from the media and from fans alike probably less hyping up in the offseason and more, hey, let me just see it when the season starts. And if it's there, I'll be excited. And if it's not, then I never got my hopes up in the first place. I just think the Jelani situation is, we see it in sports all the time, right? Like you get a guy on rosters, you see it sometimes from guys drafted into the NFL where you're just a athletic specimen and you have all the physical traits to be, talented at your position. And, it gets people excited and everyone says there's no way this guy doesn't pan out. And maybe Jelani's story is far from done, but we've seen a lot of athletes where you're tall and you're fast and you're big and you're athletic, and sometimes it just doesn't all piece itself together and it doesn't work out as people expected. Like for every Jimmy Graham story there's a lot of stories of guys that just don't pan out. And I just think that's the reality of it. Now we'll see what this offseason can do for him and if he can become, kind of maybe more of what we expect. But I understand if fans are kind of just done hearing about it and if they're kind of just sitting there thinking to themselves, when I turn on the TV for that Texas game in August, if Jelani comes out and he's making big plays, then sweet, it's finally clicking for him. And if not, then I'm done getting my hopes up at this point. We see it in sports all the time. We see it in all sports. Like we see it in the NBA. A guy gets drafted because he's got all the physical traits, but it just doesn't pan out. We see it in the NFL. You see it in baseball. Like guys get drafted because they're like, this guy's a physical specimen. And it's like, okay, well, he can't hit the ball. Like what's that do for you? So it is what it is.
Yeah, the name that I thought of when Stefan said that was John Ross. who was the draft pick of the Bengals, where like I think he had like the fastest.
He like broke
40.
the record in the 40-yard dash.
Yeah, and everybody was like, "This guy's going to be awesome." Like, think about all the deep shots that he can, catch, and like think about what the Bengals offense can be when you have that level of field stretcher, and like think about what you could do, with him in the screen game, where it's like if he catches a screen, if he gets on a line, he's gone, and like feels like people kind of hype themselves up, and then you reach a point where the idea is almost better than the concept. Because like you talk about Jelani Thurman as a tight end, you're like 6'7" tight end who's big with all the athletic traits in the world. Heck yeah, sign me up for that. Like, of course we're gonna, of course, like that guy's gonna work out. Of course, how could he not? And you start to wonder, like, okay, is that too unfair of expectations early on? Maybe this was just the timeline he was always supposed to be on. I kind of fall somewhere in the middle. Like, I think Ryan Day's commentary last year was obviously trying to, I think we talked about this, like, so I don't want to hit on it, was just trying to motivate him and trying to like hype him up and trying to get him into a role of like, look, man, you have an opportunity in front of you, like, come take it. And I think it could be a little bit of both. I think people got very excited about it, and maybe prematurely so, for a year or two, because like tight end is a very, very difficult position to learn, especially when you're coming into a college rank, because like you have to learn how to block. So like think about all the things that you have to do as an offensive lineman in terms of putting on strength, putting on weight, learning blocking techniques, learning how to block, learning the offense. You've also got to learn how to exist in a passing tree that has NFL players all over the place. So and you can't embarrass yourself in that. So like playing as a tight end is very, very difficult. So I think when you look at Jelani Thurman, maybe this is just going to take some time. But to me, this is this is it. The spring has to be kind of when he makes his move, because you bring in Max Clare, you have Will Kazmarek. It feels like you got your 1-2 punch. You got to bring in Thurman, and he's got to come along, or else. I mean, I think a lot of people, like Stefan said, are just going to start to say, you know what, I'm not doing this again.
Stefan, you sound like you've given up on Jelani Thurman.
I don't know if I've given up, but I'm just not going to spend this offseason talking about how it's finally going to click if I don't know if it's going to click.
Okay.
If he has a great season, I'll be the first one hyping him up. I still think he's got all the traits to be great, but it's just like, why do I think this offseason is going to be different than previous ones?
No, I agree. Context is always important. And I think what happens is you see stars by a kid's name and you forget the context behind those things. Let's take Julian Fleming for an instance. Julian Fleming was the number one wide receiver in the country in 2021 when he committed to Ohio State. At the time of his commitment, he was the highest rated wide receiver recruit Ohio State had ever landed. Now, that has since been passed up by the current person wearing number 4, but he was the highest rated wide receiver recruit ever landed at Ohio State. In fact, at the time of his commitment, Quinn Ewers wasn't committed. JJ was 9 years old. Terrell Pryor, Ted Ginn Jr., Jack Sawyer, Julian Fleming. That was the list of the highest rated guys Ohio State had ever landed, according to the 247 Sports Composite. So based off of that, what would you think, Stefan? Oh, this dude's a 3-and-done first-round draft pick at wide receiver. 5-star, highest rated receiver ever, Brian Hartline, first-round draft pick. Well, he started for 2 years here, was a wide receiver 3, never had a 1,000-yard season, transferred to Penn State, and I don't even think he had 300 receiving yards this year. So based on his stars, you would say Julian Fleming's college career was a disappointment. He did not live up to the hype. But that's not a fair assessment of Fleming, because it does not provide context behind why his development went the way it did. Julian Fleming is from a small town in Pennsylvania. He went to Southern Columbia High School, a very good high school program, but at a lower level where they ran a wing T offense. So he was an elite athlete playing in an offense that, quite frankly, wasn't going to prepare him to be an NFL wide receiver. That just was. So there was already, take away the injuries, because he had a lot of injuries here. Him and Jackson Smith-Njigba came from two very different backgrounds. Jackson Smith-Njigba was a 5-star wide receiver from Texas. So in year 2, it's not crazy to think he's going to be ready to be a starter for you. Julian Fleming had to learn how to play football. But because people didn't want to consider that context, it was, well, Jackson's a 5-star, and look what he's doing in year 2. Julian, what are you doing? That's what happened there. I'll use another example for you from this 2025 recruiting class, and I've continued to use it, and at times people have pushed back on it. Tavian St. Clair has all the talent in the world. He looks the part. He's the number 4 player and the number 3 quarterback in the 2025 recruiting class. That dude might end up being a star and a number 1 pick in the NFL draft one day, especially when you base it off his physical traits and his stars. But he's from Bellefontaine, Ohio, right? They're not producing NFL talent. They're not producing dudes where, okay, 5-star in year 2, let's get on the field. So if he's not ready in year 2, and even if he doesn't look great at the beginning of year 3, if he takes over for after Julian Sand, you can't compare him to what CJ Stroud coming out of California, Quinn Ewers coming out of Texas, somebody coming out. You can't compare it. It's not the same. All stars are not created equal. And I'm using him as an example to get back to the Jelani Thurman point. Jelani Thurman comes from a pretty prestigious high school down there in Georgia. They win a lot of football games down there. He's got athletic parents. I think his father played in the NFL, and I think his mother also played college sports. I can't remember what sports she played. She might have been a track athlete. I might have that wrong, though. But as Andrew just said, tight end is a hard position to learn. There is a lot involved, especially at Ohio State, where it might be the 3rd most important position in this offense, and not because they catch passes, but because they have to be able to catch passes. They have to be able to block like an offensive lineman. They use a lot of 12 and 13 personnel here. There's just a lot that they throw at Jelani. And most tight ends in high school don't play tight end. They play wide receiver. So there is okay, so what's the context of why this guy hasn't panned out yet? So I'm with you guys. I'm not going to walk into this offseason thinking, oh, is Jelani Thurman ready to be the next Antonio Gates or whatever? But, hey, 2 years in, have you learned enough? Has it clicked yet to where you can be a contributor? I think is a fair expectation for him, because you have to allow yourself to remember the context behind. Yes, he looks like he should be a dude, but the road from where he is as a high school kid, essentially playing playing wide receiver, to quality tight end at a school that runs an NFL offense, those are miles and miles and miles and miles apart. Let's take our last break here, and then we have 2 questions from one texter plus one more thing here on Buckeye Talk. Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means. That's Stefan Krajisnik, and that's Andrew Gillis. We're wrapping up our texters pod. If you want to ask questions that provoke thoughtful conversation on a podcast for way too long. I mean, we're hour and 15 minutes in, and we still got like 3 more questions to go. Get a text 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. I can always tell when we're going long because I can see Stefan going, Can we please? This is so long. The problem is if you go look at our podcast numbers, he goes, oh, that's why we go so long. People love this stuff. Is this the longest podcast you've ever been on in your life, Stefan?
Probably, yeah. Well, I think we've done. Talking about this episode specifically.
No, not this episode. Just like the concept of what this podcast is.
Probably. I don't hate it. You're making it seem like I hate it.
No, you don't hate it. No, listen, you're like Luke Montgomery against Tennessee. You're on snap 25, and it's like, okay, we gotta get that guy out of there for a couple of snaps and get him back there. That's what you are. Yeah, and eventually, listen, we'll give you another 6 months. And then by the time the season rolls around, you'll be ready to play the full 60. That's all this is. It's, you're a young guy playing more snaps than you're used to.
Year 1, developmental piece.
Yeah, listen, year 1, the first 2 years are on me as the host. Okay, the first 9 months are on me as the host. Everything after that is on you.
He is not on the Jelani Thurman track.
I mean, we don't know that yet.
Developing well.
I guess we'll see. Jelani Thurman might be developing well. For all that we know, that it's just what the outside world thinks of what Jelani Thurman's development should be and what the people who actually matter think his development should be. He might be on the right track. Who knows?
It might be Jimmy Graham.
It could be Jimmy Graham. I think the basketball team could use Jelani Thurman. From the 4-3-4, It's 2 questions in one. I always try to mention this when I send the question, but keep up the great work, guys. Really enjoyed listening to the 3 of you this past season and look forward to next season's coverage. We appreciate that so much. Question number 1 for the 2024-2025 team. So that's this past season. If you had to replace Jeremiah Smith with Marvin Harrison Jr. or Will Howard with CJ Stroud, which choice are you making? Looking back on how the season played out, Will's ability to run was very crucial in some games, and CJ probably doesn't give you that same ability. I think JJ is on a different planet than Marv, which is totally okay. I personally would swap out CJ for Will and throw the ball every play, as Steven preaches. Not every play, but
every play.
No, not every play. But if you have a 7-play drive, 4 of them should be, more than half should be throwing the football. That's question number 1. Andrew, I'll start with you. Those are your options. You can either switch out CJ Stroud for Will Howard or Jeremiah Smith and Marvin Harrison Jr. Which one are you doing?
I'm taking CJ.
Is this a conversation?
No.
Okay.
I think this is a compliment to JJ because I think we all think he's just as good as Marv, if not better.
Which is funny because we did a pod like 2.5 months ago where everybody was like, oh, we would still take Marv's 2 seasons. And then JJ turned into the Terminator for the last month and a half. We were like, okay.
Stefan, we did a podcast last year during one of those like meaningless weeks where Ohio State just thumped Minnesota or Purdue or whoever they played, where they were just killing them. And we were like, let's talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. And we talked about him as like, we put him on number 1 on Mount Buckmore as like the best Ohio State receiver of all time. And I think a lot of people agreed with us. And like Steven and I were kind of like, wouldn't it be funny if we had to redo this list because there's another guy that's really good coming?
We have to redo it.
Wouldn't that be nuts? And now we're going to have to redo that list.
We're going to have to redo this.
But yeah, so yeah, I mean, look, Will Howard played amazingly down the stretch. And like, I wanted to be the first one to talk about how great he played because like, I was definitely lower on him than you guys were in the regular season.
He was hating.
Will was awesome. Will was awesome in that 4-game playoff run. But like, with all due respect to Will, like, he's not CJ Stroud.
CJ Stroud just won an NFL playoff game.
Well, CJ Stroud was like throwing for like 4,500 yards and 45 touchdowns. Like,
he never threw for 4,500 yards.
Yes, he did in 2021. Didn't he throw for 4,500?
No. The record is like 4,500. No.
I thought it was 4,500, 44, and 6.
I don't think that's correct because you also missed a game. It was 4,400, 44, and 6.
Oh, all right. Well, horseshoes and hand grenades.
Steven.
Yeah, I mean, he did it to me yesterday with the whole, I didn't say 45 to 50. I said 40 to 45. So I have to return the favor. Also, CJ doing that while also missing a game where he could have had like 500 yards and 4 touchdowns against Akron is nuts. This isn't a conversation. It's CJ Stroud. The idea, I know what CJ throwing to Marv looks like already. It's 77 catches for 1,263 yards and 14 touchdowns. Will Howard throwing to JJ is like 76 catches, 1,300 yards, and 15 touchdowns. So, I don't know, man. The idea of CJ Stroud throwing to Jeremiah Smith at a college football game gives me goosebumps.
It's the Colin Simmons JJ conversation. Listen, we all think Colin Simmons is amazing and a great freshman, but he's not JJ. We all think Will Howard is a great quarterback who just put together an amazing season and maybe was even underrated for how good he was. He's not CJ Stroud.
Is there at any point in the year where maybe you take Marv over JJ in this situation?
Yeah, when Jeremiah dropped the first pass.
Okay.
No. We have to be honest. When we did our ratings, we had Marv over JJ, and we did those ratings like after the Michigan game.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. So there was a point very recently.
Yeah.
There is a world here where Will Howard is enough that you're just going to replace Marv with JJ and essentially get the same result, which is enough. Because I think Marvin Harrison Jr., in fact, I watched Marvin Harrison Jr. in a playoff game. He did what JJ did. JJ just got to do it 3 more times. That's the only difference. But now that math has changed because, listen, man, if JJ doesn't win the Biletnikoff Award next year, we all have to reevaluate how we vote for him. And I understand stats and all that. Sometimes it's okay that we all know who the best player is already because that's what happened with Marv in 2022. His stats weren't blowing you off the board. But Andrew, we watch ball, right? Just like we have eyes.
We are ball watchers.
Yeah. So sometimes, okay, yeah, his numbers are better. Are y'all watching what this man is doing? JJ's got to win the Biletnikoff Award next year. That's just, I'm not gonna say he should win it both years, but he should be a finalist both years, and he needs to win it next year. The other question.
Just keep that in mind too when we're voting for defensive backs, and one defensive back might not have 100 safeties and 5 interceptions, but he's still really good at safety. So remember that.
I wonder why he threw that one out there. Given the current draft order, where do you think JJ would go in this draft? I think he would be the best player available, but it's close with Hunter. I think the Titans and Browns both desperately need a QB, so I would have him going to the Patriots, sadly. We have to keep in mind that teams are stupid with quarterback. What pick is JJ this year, Stefan?
He's number 1 on the big board, and I think our texter's spot on there. He probably goes 4th overall to the Patriots, if I had to take a guess, because I think Titans, Browns, and Giants in some order. Maybe depending on what the Browns wanted to do with their quarterback situation, maybe JJ would go number 2 to the Browns. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
He's either going number 2 or number 4. I don't think the Titans or Giants would take him. Although having Neighbors and JJ Smith would be awesome. You would just need
Who's throwing him the ball?
Drew Lock to throw him the ball.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at that point. Just throw it out there. One of them's going to catch it.
Yeah, I think when you look at the big board, it's him, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter. I'm curious, just as like a fan of football, to see what Travis Hunter's like NFL outlook is going to be. Like,
I think he's a corner.
Yeah, if he's but is he going to play corner and then no receiver, or are they going to play him 15 snaps at receiver? Like what does his NFL outlook look like? Because
I think there's going to be a lot of fighting for him to be able to do both. I do not. And I am not going to say it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that there is going to be. I would assume that during the draft process, that is a part of the conversation between him and a lot of these organizations, because I do wonder, I don't think he's going to slip, but if he is adamant on, I want to play both sides of the ball, don't take me unless you're going to let me play both sides of the ball, and teams are hesitant to do that, that is the way he ends up slipping in the draft, because nobody wants to deal with that. I think there's a chance that he is a elite cornerback in the NFL. Top 5 cornerback in 2 or 3 years. Receiver, I think he's a decent receiver. But if he is adamant on playing both sides of the ball, I would not be shocked if teams start shying away from him, which is how he slips. Meanwhile, Cleveland's got to figure out, I mean, they're paying Deshaun Watson all this money, man.
Yeah, it's like, do you really want to draft another quarterback in that situation?
Right now, I just think they need to get through the Deshaun, which is why Abdul Carter has been popping up as like maybe the guy they take there. So then it's like, are the Giants really going to take a receiver 2 years in a row? Which is how you get to New England and giving your
Giants
number 2 draft.
Giants and Titans are taking quarterbacks.
Right. So then it becomes a go get your first round quarterback a weapon with the Giant
his floor to me would be 5 for Jacksonville.
With Jacksonville, yeah.
Because, like you could make a case that Shedeur and Cam Ward are your top 2 quarterbacks off the board, and then somebody takes Carter, somebody takes Hunter, and then Jeremiah's in that mix. Because, like, if we're talking about him as if, hey, this was his junior year, and this was his entrant year, and this was
might not change anything.
I think we're kind of I think like rather than he could just declare early. I think if we were saying like this is his junior year, and we were talking about him, this is just who he is as a player, not he's going to get better. Like I think 5 is his floor, but I also don't think like 2 is his ceiling is crazy. Like, I don't think it's crazy to say that Cleveland might just look at it and be like, man, you know what? Like, let's just take Julio Jones this time around because we traded out of the pick last time. So let's go take him this time.
There's an easy way out of the T. Higgins situation for the Bengals. It's called trading up and giving up a future first rounder to a team that thinks next year's quarterback class is better.
You trade T. Higgins
to go get a better T. Higgins?
Yep.
Jeremiah's draft stock is going to be very fascinating to me over these next couple of years for a lot of different reasons.
If he ended up on the Bengals, Steven, we would be doing a lot of late Sunday podcasts because I'd be making that hour drive over every Sunday.
I mean, listen. I mean, him going to Cleveland, what a win for cleveland.com. From Ohio State to the Browns, everybody's getting raises.
Steak dinner on the company card,
Come
baby.
on, man. Come on. I keep teasing that podcast. I'd be really putting energy towards getting that podcast done. I don't think it changes much of any. I think he's going to be the best pure football player, whether we do this year, next year, or the year he's actually draft eligible. And he's probably going to be the first non-quarterback taken. Now, it kind of depends on, right, when Walker from Georgia went number 1, it's because there were no good quarterbacks in that draft.
If Julian Sand balls out or
then
DJ
Julian
Lagway
Sand's going to go higher.
Yeah, right.
Well, maybe if he's QB1. Like when Myles Garrett went number 1, it's because there weren't great quarterbacks. So the question is he going to be the first non-quarterback or just the first non-verse offensive player? Right? Because Abdul Carter is a defensive player. Marvin Harrison Jr. was the first non-quarterback taken in the draft. So that's really and that just comes down to draft order, how teams trade around stuff. But it's pretty set in stone that JJ is probably the best NFL draft prospect in college football right now. I don't think Caleb Downs is second simply because of the position he plays, but he's up there. He's top 5. But that's what this boils down to is, where do I think JJ goes? Well, how many teams take quarterbacks before one doesn't need a quarterback? That's where I think JJ goes. Yeah. Last question from Parker in the 304. Hey guys, of the seniors and juniors leaving for the draft, who are your favorite guys to talk to / interview who won't be back next year? Also, what was your favorite game to cover this year? National championship game excluded. Stefan, I'll let you go first because you've only got 7 months to kind of bank on in terms of getting to know guys. Who was your favorite interview and your favorite game?
Yeah, I think Jack was the favorite interview. He always had something interesting to say, and I think he was always, I thought he was always fairly honest when he talked to us. I think some guys you see in media, they kind of shy away because they don't want to, become a headline or become bulletin board material. I thought he was just outstanding. I thought he was always honest with us. We didn't talk to him a ton, like as much as some people. He wasn't. We talked to Cody Simon. It felt like every day. We didn't talk to Jack Sawyer, that often. But every time we did, he was fascinating to talk to and always had something good to say. So I'll say Jack, which is maybe the easy answer, but I always enjoyed when we talked to him. Favorite game, probably the game at Oregon. That was an elite environment. Their press box setup is awesome with the open air press box, and we're like, everyone always talks about how Austin Stadium has that one side that has kind of that awning that comes over that keeps a lot of the sound in. We were under that. So those of us who were healthy for that game, it was very loud and a very good game to begin with. Top 2, top 3 matchup, whatever it was at that point. Living up to all the hype. So I know that was an Ohio State loss, so I apologize for bringing up any bad memories. But that was definitely the coolest environment game I got to experience. Although I will say the number 2 option, just because I had a ton of friends in town, was the Indiana game. Seeing your alma mater in a top 5 matchup with Ohio State at Ohio Stadium, it's hard to beat that too, I guess.
What a rough day for you.
I was fine. The worst day was you at Oregon. That was way worse than anything I had to experience.
Oh yeah,
I thought Stephen was going to die at Oregon. I really thought we were just going to have to. I really just thought we were going to leave him in Eugene.
I wish I could redo the Oregon game and not get sick, because that is the best. That's the best football game of the year.
Yeah.
Objectively, that, and then obviously Georgia and Alabama. But that was the best football game all season, and I was sick for it. So as soon as it was clear that Will Howard was down and not like there wasn't any time on the clock, I completely leaned all the way into my death. But it was a great game. It was a great environment as well. I wish I could experience it fully healthy so I could completely do my job. But since you took that one, I won't take that one. I can tell you which game I hated the most. I hated the Tennessee game. It was cold. It was unbearably cold. And unlike those Tennessee players who came out shirtless trying to act tough, no, I was bundled up. I had a scarf. Typically, only Stefan's got the scarves. I've got the scarves. It was cold that day. My favorite game It's the Rose Bowl, man. It was beautiful that day. It was a perfect day. I always get nervous when I'm in environments where everything needs to be perfect today. Don't rain. And I got nervous the night before of, I really hope it doesn't rain at the freaking Rose Bowl. That would make this very, very annoying. And it didn't rain. It was a beautiful day. It was sunny skies. It was clear skies, sunny skies. And we went the weirdest way possible on the media shuttle to get to the Rose Bowl. I felt like we were going through back streets and whatnot. And then it took us an hour and a half to get back. But the Rose Bowl, that was my favorite game because it was cool watching JJ be JJ in the most historic venue in college football. My favorite person to interview, I don't know yet. Andrew, I'm going to let you go, and then I'll come back with that.
Not to repeat too much of what we said, so I'll go with my favorite guy to interview was Seth MacLaughlin.
The guy he hated on this time last year, by the way.
He had snapping problems, and he needed to fix
Jalen
them.
Milroe had snapping problems. That was on the court. He was on the quarterback.
Seth was great to talk to for a couple of different reasons.
Did you tell him that you were hating on him in January, or did that not come up as you guys became best buds?
Shockingly, I didn't tell someone that I didn't think they could play the position in January.
I think that's your best bud now. I think you have to be honest with him about how your relationship.
I mean, the snapping issues were a thing. It's not like I'm not just like he has a bunch of snapping problems. I know, but I'm just defending my position at the time.
No, that's fine. I think you should tell your new best bud that you were hating on him this time last year. Text him right now and tell him.
No. Yeah, but he was honest. Like to the honesty point, like he was always open to go with people. Like Steven just said, like the Tennessee players that were trying to be tough. Like he just did like an Instagram live interview a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, "Yeah," I was like, somebody brought that up, is like laughing at Tennessee, and he goes, "Yeah, about that." Tennessee didn't get told, or Tennessee didn't think, oh, it's too cold, we got to put on our shirts. Like a referee came over and told them they needed to have like their numbers on them or something. They needed to have like their number on their person at some point so that you could identify who they were when they were warming up. So it was like, it wasn't let's Tennessee, let's try to be warm, let's try to be cool, and no pun intended. And then they were just like, no, screw this. It's too cold out there for this. Like somebody came over and told them, you're not allowed to do this. And like, it was very, like all the podcast hosts were like, well, I'm just going to pretend you didn't say that because it's much funnier the other way. But like, he was always open about that stuff. You were just able to talk to him like as a human being. And I like those kind of interactions. Like I had that with a couple of players in the NFL where it's just like, sometimes it feels very transactional, what we do. It's like, hey, Cody, thank you for your time. And then as soon as the interview's over, somebody runs away to the locker room. You know, hey, thank you for your time, man. And as soon as it's over, they're like, they can't wait to be done. You know, Seth would be like, how are you today? Like, how are things going for you? Like, he was just a nice guy, and he was just good to talk to. He was open. He was honest. Yeah, I really like talking to Seth. I will miss kind of having that guy on the offensive line. Offensive linemen are my favorite guys to talk to. Just real quick, I think the Rose Bowl is the Rose Bowl. Like that was obvious. That's obviously great. But to me, I think the Oregon game at Eugene was my favorite game that I've covered this year, and my favorite game that I've covered on the Ohio State beat. That game was everything you want Ohio State football to be. That game was everything you want college football to be. Sans a loss.
Yeah.
But like, it was a beautiful day in Eugene. I don't know how many of our listeners went out. Probably not a ton, but like, if anybody's listening, you know what I'm talking about. It was gorgeous and it was warm, and you had the mountains in the background. Like I remember,
we had an amazing brunch too before the game.
We did. I was still alive for the brunch. I know.
Yeah. Well, and shout out me for picking the brunch spot.
That's true.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did. Good for
like
you.
we went and we watched Alabama, South Carolina. We got to like drive through a little bit of the town, and like you saw how quiet the town was, and then you get to Eugene and like campus, and it's just this chaos of noise. And I remember I was talking to like one of the ushers up in the press box. Like I was like looking at the mountains. I like walked behind the press box outside, and she was like, oh, hey, like, are you from Ohio? Like, are you not from here? I went, no, like, we don't get to see these every day. And she was, so here's my advice. Come back at halftime. Like right at the end of halftime, right before they're about to start the second half, you're going to see the sunset over the mountains. And she was 100% right. It was gorgeous.
Turning Oregon into the Rose Bowl.
No, it was, I mean, it was
Wait,
cool
was this before or after you lost your credential?
I was getting ready to say that next.
This was after. Yeah, I was. Yeah, Steven and I were walking around outside, and my credential.
I was not walking anywhere. I was trying to hydrate up.
Stefan and I were walking outside, and
I was starting to die at that point.
Was no longer on my person, which like Stefan mentioned, he was like, look, this probably happens a lot because the SID who I texted from Oregon, I was like, hey, lost my credential. Can I get another one? And he's like, oh, yeah, here you go. And he like set it up. So Stefan was like, look, these things are like made of paper. Like this probably happens a lot. So I was able to get my credential back, but there was like a 15-minute period where I'm sitting there thinking, I'm going to have to buy a ticket to get into this friggin' game.
He was crying. He was starting to cry.
I was not crying.
The narrative was already written.
You didn't see me. You didn't see me. You were up in the press box.
It was only a little bit of a panic.
Yeah.
Oh, I was panicked on the inside, but I was not going to panic on the outside until later. But yeah, like that game, like the atmosphere of the crowd, you got to see Shout at Oregon, which is like one of the cooler like college football like moments. It's like jump around with Wisconsin. It's like you get to see something like that. You get to see two great teams. You get to see a great game. There's a little bit of controversy in it. Like it just everything you want college football to be was that day. And that's why I think that was my favorite game of the year.
So just so we're all not having a love fest for a team who didn't win a national title.
It's not a team. It's just the game. It's just the game itself, the atmosphere itself. It's not the team itself.
You did just say it was the best game of college football this year.
That's why I said we. I didn't say you guys. I was also in on this. I'm with you guys. I'm chastising myself as well. In hindsight, I appreciated the Northwestern game. In the moment, I know I was, and you guys don't know this, I was telling Stefan, like, why are we playing a football game in a baseball stadium? Soldier Field is right there. What are we doing? What are we doing here? This is stupid. Playing at Wrigley Field is kind of cool. It's a cool thing that you can tell your grandkids about. I mean, you can tell your grandparents about it too, but it's just not the same. You can tell your grandkids about it one day. And also, watching Carnell Tate with his family after the game for a guy who, you got to remember, this dude lost his mom last year. He's from Chicago. And so to watch him around his support system, not asking anybody no questions. I just wanted to watch. I like people watching. So I'm just watching this kid with his family, and he's not the most emotional person in the world, but you could just tell how much that meant to him. Just being, regardless of what he did in the game, he had 2 touchdowns in the game. That's great and all that. But watching him around his people, given what he had gone through over the past year and a half, I thought that was really special. So I wanted to mention that one as well.
I didn't realize we had asked him so much, being a Chicago kid, what Wrigley Field meant to him. I didn't realize he was literally like one of the White Sox NIL athletes.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
So when they won the championship and the White Sox tweeted like, congrats to Carnell Tate, I was like, oh, all right.
So it's like, this means nothing to me. I don't care.
It's like, listen, unless the Ricketts family wants to start dropping some money, I'm rooting for the team down south.
The team down south. Good God.
So the second part, it's the reason why I passed it off to Andrew is because this is difficult for me to answer. Will Howard was awesome this year. I think as a quarterback, he's older, so he's not new to this, but the way he allowed us to get a window into his emotions, the way he would answer questions with insight, he was great this year. As far as the senior class, that's a difficult thing for me to answer because this is Ryan Day's first actual recruiting class, his 2021 recruiting class, and now a lot of them are walking out the door. Well, it's also essentially mine. I covered the end of the 19 class when they were literally signing, and it was like, hey, Urban Meyer just retired. Are you still coming to Ohio State? Garrett Wilson. Yeah. Harry Miller. Yeah. J-Mo. Yeah. Jordan Battle. No, I'm going to Saban. I covered 2020, so I saw all the CJ Stroud stuff. I saw that build, but this was the first one from scratch. I still remember where I was the day Jack Sawyer committed because it was Super Bowl Sunday, and I just remember being like, dang it, Jack. What can you not do this today? His father also thought that. They told him to not do that. They told him to wait a couple of months. So he followed.
Wait, which Super Bowl is that?
2019. So whatever number that is.
I'll guess it's probably the Chiefs against someone.
Well, no, it was either Rams, Patriots. If you mean the 2019 season,
no. Like the 2018 season, the 2019.
Oh, so it was Rams,
Super
Patriots.
Bowl.
That was the awful one. It was like 13-3.
Rams and Patriots.
Yeah.
Jack just followed the directions of absolutely nobody by committing to Ohio State that afternoon. Just nobody. Thanks, Jack. But I covered all these guys, and I remember I've talked to all those guys. a lot since they were 16, 17 years old and built relationships with those guys. Jacques Sawyer, Mecca Ibuka, JT Tuimoloau, Donovan Jackson, Travion Henderson, even Kyle McCord. I talked to him a lot when he was in high school. Michael Hall Jr., who's from Streetsboro up there in Northeast Ohio near us. J.K. Johnson, I remember talking with his father about the plans for his career. And obviously things didn't work out. He's transferred to LSU. But Jordan Hancock, I remember him being committed to Clemson. And I remember I was on my way back from a workout. Actually, no, I think we were playing basketball. We were doing something. I don't know. But I was on my way back when like the buzz started to build that, hey, Jordan Hancock might be decommitting from Clemson tonight. And I remember texting Doug Nathan and our boss David, like, hey, this is about to happen. I'll have something about it. And he ends up obviously flipping to Ohio State not long after that. Evan Pryor, Reed Carrico, Marvin Harrison Jr. I remember, I can't remember his name right now, but St. Joe Prep's high school coach. I remember I had a conversation with Kyle McCord on like a Tuesday, just talking with Kyle McCord, just, hey, Ohio State's quarterback, how's life? 4 days after that conversation, Marvin Harrison Jr. committed to Ohio State on like a Friday before a game. And I called their coach back. And he was like, yeah, I got Marv right here for you. And so that was the first conversation I ever had with Marvin Harrison Jr. Ben Krish, who obviously didn't work out here. He ended up transferring. But I had many conversations with him. Jansen Dunn. I'm naming people who aren't even here now. But that's just how deep this class was. I remember Jack Sawyer putting together the Buckeye Bash so that kids could come to Columbus and they were like staying at his house. Because remember, Stefan and Andrew, we were during COVID, so they couldn't take official visits. So people were taking the self-guided visits. I remember the Zen Maholsky commitment and recruitment late. I remember getting on a Zoom call with Jesse Mirko, where it's 6 o'clock in the morning here, and it's like 7 o'clock at night where he is out in Australia, and us having a conversation about some things. So that's a hard thing for me to answer because, I don't know, kind of all of them. Because I've kind of watched all of them develop into what they are now, and some of them obviously it worked out on Ohio State and some of them it didn't. But you said Jack Sawyer as the easy answer. I think that's mine too, because Jack has always been open to talking to me, whether it's on the record, off the record, or we're at Big Ten Media Days and it's like, hey Jack, can you come sit with me for 15 minutes and do a podcast? Sure, we can do all this. Even though I've been talking for the past 4 hours, Steven, I'll gladly come do this for you. For me, it's all of them, because my career here kind of started based on covering these guys become Buckeyes, and now I'm seeing them walk out the door having in some ways accomplished everything that they were supposed to accomplish, but at the same time maybe taking the hardest possible road to making those things actually happen. So that's for me. I've just got a connection to this class that maybe I'm not going to have to any other class. Man, you cover recruiting now, so maybe you'll have that for this 2025 class. It's like, man, yeah, I've been talking to these guys. I've been driving around Ohio talking to these guys. Stefan, you don't cover recruiting, so maybe you just don't care. And that's fine.
I'm still a human being, Steven.
Allegedly. So they say. So that'll do it. Yeah, for me,
there was one question we didn't hit on. It was the question about Penn State being on the schedule.
Yeah, sorry.
This is a quick answer, but do you want to read the question?
Yeah, from the 419, when does Penn State fall off of our schedule? It seems like we play them way more than any other team, not Michigan.
Yeah, they're not. Penn State's not on the schedule the next 2 years. They are 2025. They are, and then 26 and 27. They're not. I think the reason Penn State has been on the schedule 2024 season and 2025 is kind of just random. Like someone had to stay from like they had Indiana this year. They don't have them in 2025. Like it's just kind of been randomized. It just so happened that they've gotten Penn State, in 24 and 25. So you'll see Penn State kind of start to cycle through here in a bit. I know we had a few people text us about that, so I just wanted to make sure we provided concrete answer on why that is the way it is. They're not Penn State's not a permanent opponent. You're not going to see them every year. It just so happened that these first 2 years, I don't know if it was random. Maybe the Big Ten wanted it. I think it's random that they have been on the schedule.
I think they're trying to create a schedule where you play every team at least once in the 4 years, and so that means sometimes you end up playing a team twice. But thank you for reminding me of that. That's why I had that one. Next year, the only Big Ten East teams, if we're talking pre-expansion, that Ohio State plays are Penn State, Michigan, and Rutgers. And 2 of those games are at home, and one of them is obviously at Michigan. Michigan's the only permanent opponent. Everybody else, all the other 8 Big Ten games are going to be random every single year. Get the text 614-350-3315. That was long, but that's because you guys asked thought-provoking questions that lead us to have long conversations where we make fun of each other for our weird takes and also talk about the Oregon game where I got sick and Andrew almost didn't get a chance to cover the game because he had an irresponsible moment. 614-350-3315 for Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. I'm Stephen Means, and that was Buckeye Talk.